So the focus for today is using Bluebeam Revu for the plan review process for like cities, townships, all that kind of process to go through. This one's gonna be a little bit different than kind of my standard kind of presentation to go through. I'm gonna focus more on the whole kind of workflow that might be impactful for you to use with this whole process, how to share the files, whatnot with the team and get reviews, get reporting, go through all that process with everybody. So real quick on the agenda, we want to walk through a little bit about me, about US CAD, what we want to learn from today's webinar, just diving into it. It's all live presentation I'll be showing to you. I don't have any canned videos or whatnot to share. It's all going to be happening live. And if you have questions throughout the process, there is the questions panel within the webinar interface that you have. Feel free to ask your questions inside of there. I'll try to spend some time to answer those questions just live and show the answers to it. We are recording the webinar as well. So as you submit your questions, those will be tracked and recorded also. So if I don't get a chance to respond to your question throughout the webinar, I will be responding to those via a spreadsheet. So at the end of all this, you will get a link to the recording of the presentation, as well as the spreadsheet of all the questions that were asked and all the answers that were being given to all those. So if you have a question, by all means, let it fly. So real quick on me and my background, like I said, my name is Ken Phelps with US CAD. I'm the Senior Bluebeam Product Specialist here. I've been doing presentations like this, working with clients like yourselves for over 20 years now. I've been doing it for a long time. Little touch on who is US CAD, what do we focus on? One of the leading AEC technology firms in the country. We're one of the top handful that are specialized in construction, that entire process. Some of the services that we can provide, beyond just training as far as how to use the products that you want to leverage, be it AutoCAD or Civil 3D or whatever it may be for your design software. There's a whole host of other pieces that come into that whole conversation too, with the scan to BIM, taking that information into a BIM environment, virtual destruction, even production and your team augmentation. So if you don't have the bandwidth to get certain projects done, we have a design team that can help support that. Some of those products that we help with Autodesk, Bluebeam, the DLT, Visual, Leica, Plant Fuse, there's a whole host of pieces that come into play that we can help support your team with. Just a handful of our clients we've worked with, some of the names that may look familiar to you. Where we're located, we've got multiple offices across the West Coast, even the Midwest. There's locations that we don't have tagged where certain people are located in Michigan and Florida and Texas, Wisconsin, whatnot. We got people that are basically from coast to coast. The intent of today, I want to go through three main objectives with you. First one being how we can share the files that you're being given. If you want to go through the permitting process, if it's internal capital projects, whatever it might be, how do we share that with the team so everyone can have their say and any kind of comments that are being added to those plans being used for permitting or the capital projects, like I said, how do we share that internally? And different ways we can go through and mark those PDFs up. In a lot of cities and townships, there's a lot of different teams that are at play. So how do we kind of know what team has said what? So some strategies that we have to go through and address those. And last point here is getting some of the data out. So you have the plan set up and it's been marked up by the various teams. So how do you get that reporting about who said what in different formats? So we'll touch on that topic here as well. So just diving right in. So I'm just going to go right into the software. So here's my Bluebeam Revu. Pretty straightforward. One of the first things that I like to go through with the PDFs I've been given is just verify it meets your requirements. So certain factors that you want to probably have in place when a file's been submitted to you for permitting is making sure it has certain things applied to it, just to make your lives easier. So one of the first things I like to look at is just how the PDF has been labeled. So in my example here, looking at my thumbnails for this PDF, it's just simply page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So depending on who's making it, what kind of software they have at their disposal to submit this to you, they can go through and create the PDF with the labels applied. So versus just being page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll have, say in my case down here, the actual sheet number is G0.01 and the title is cover page. That can be the label for the page. So that might be one of your requirements to submit something in, is to have that done. Now, if you don't require it, you can go through and apply that within Bluebeam Revu, so then the rest of the team has to go through and work on these files can do so a bit more efficiently. That's just a matter of trying to create your own page labels, and we can take it right from a portion of the PDF. Now, one caveat to this to work out is that this does have to be a text-based PDF. So if it's, like a literal napkin sketch that someone has just written on and drawn in some shape they want to have for a shed, you're not going to have this level of capability with something along those lines. But if it's been not done from a contractor, an architect, whomever has written this content, they can supply these with a font-based, a text-based PDF. So this becomes an opportunity for you to take advantage of that data. And you can do multiple areas. So I'm going to take the sheet number and the sheet title. I'm going to pull in this information. So you can see in the thumbnail, so preview down here, what it's going to do. I'm going to run that against all of my pages. So you see in the left-hand panel here, all my thumbnails are being displayed. It's going to change it from 1, 2, 3, 4 to pull in the actual data from the PDF on each one of those sheets. So it's got the sheet number and title for all those pages that make this up. This can just make your life a whole lot easier to navigate to the right information that you have to have. Same process with the bookmarks if you wanted to. If all you ever use is the bookmarks, you can go through and create your bookmarks and then do the same step on this. If you've already done this on the page labels, you don't have to repeat the same process to get the bookmarks generated. You can leverage the information that we just built from the page labels to make the bookmarks from. So I'll just click OK in this case. That generates that same list to navigate through the PDF without having to go through all the same steps to get the regions and define those spaces to extract. What also can be helpful in this process is to go through and create a way to link all these sheets to each other. So meaning that any place where a sheet number is discovered, link back to the appropriate sheet. So if it's part of a section or a detail, if a sheet number is referenced instead of a note, for example, how do I find a way to link those pages to each other? We can generate that with what's called a batch link. Now this is unique to Bluebeam Revu Extreme, so you will want to have the Extreme version to be able to do this. Not everyone has to have Extreme to take advantage of these links after they have been created. You just have to have the Extreme version to make the link. So if you have a certain job description, like a permit tech, they want to go through and collect the files, make sure that it matches all the criteria you want to have to go through the team to review. This could be a seat of software that they have to create for the team then to leverage after it's been done. In this case, I'm going to generate my linking here real quick. So my search terms here is just all the page numbers. Find me all these sheets. And then link back to the corresponding pages. So if I run this, it just takes a few seconds to go through and see how mine's been set up. Makes a little light blue hyperlink and all these little numbers that are showing up on my page. These are now hyperlinks to the corresponding sheet. So if I want to jump to page A1.2.1, I can select on that and I go to that sheet. Or if I'm hanging out here, I'm looking at this section, it's on A4.4, and I can select that and it takes me to 4.4. Just ways to easily navigate through the PDF, just making it easier for anyone else who has to work on this to be able to do so. But like I mentioned before, you do not have to have the Extreme version to then use these links. They're part of the PDF. You can save this file and they're part of the file. Anybody else who uses this can still take advantage of those hyperlinks as well. Now for sharing this with the team, so kind of how you want to work through this is that your individual will look at however the files are being sent into you by whatever software that you may have, EnterGov or Acela, something along those lines. You get the files collected, you verify you have what you need. You go through this step of making sure you get the bookmarks, you get the labels, you have this linking here done if you go through that step. Verify you have what you need, and then you would create a session. So what you have access to within Bluebeam Revu is a piece called Bluebeam Studio. So within Studio, there are two pieces that make this up. There are Studio projects and Studio sessions. So think of projects like a place in the cloud that you would store data. So it's a file share spot, like a OneDrive kind of place that's content in the cloud that you can just map to and pull files from to access and work on. That environment is a very linear approach, meaning it's a data management environment. If you want to work on one of those files within a Studio project, you have to check it out. Now you have ownership of it. You have the read-write capability. You can mark it up, measure, do what you have to on it, save it, then put it back. Then the next person in line can do their effort on that same file. So very linear kind of file lifecycle. What I have here on screen is the Studio Sessions portion to it. So the session enables the opportunity to have multiple people inside of that session concurrently. So if you have different teams and departments that have to access the content to work on it, you by all means absolutely can. So the days of having this giant roll of paper being copied out 7 times, one for each different department within the building, that's gone away. You don't have to have that effort anymore. Everyone can just be here inside of the session, and no one's stepping on anybody else's toes because we can all be in the same sandbox together working on the files concurrently. This will track everything. So you see here, it shows who's inside of the session. So right now I'm inside of here. Natalie's not currently logged into it, but she could be if she was available. Anytime I add a markup to this, so if I just do my really elaborate, I'm gonna draw a line. So point A to point B, here's my markup. I drew a line. Inside of that record panel, it'll go through and track all the content that I've done. So every time I were to add a markup, add a comment, whatever's here, it's all recorded. So that line I just added is right here. Also down below in the markups list, everything that you do inside of the PDF, you are accountable for. It is tracked. You add a note, you add a markup, a cloud, some common verbiage that you want to have added. Everything here is recorded. This is also what we can go through, I'll talk about in a minute, to get reporting out of here. So this is going to list all the content that's been added to this series of plans that you're reviewing. How do we get that reporting? It comes from here. So now inside of this environment, this would be something that, an example would be the permit tech who's going to verify you have all the right content, all the files, check all the right boxes to be reviewed. They would create a session, invite the various team members into that for the review step of it. Once you get the invite, you log into the session and you review it. You do your process on that file. So how can we make that step, that effort, a bit more streamlined? Well, once we're here, we can still go into what's called the tool chest. This is our library of tools that can be created for us. This can be defined for different departments. So I see in my example here, like planning has their own little tool set here with their own color mapped to that. Whereas engineering has common stamps that they may use and then their own common tools they want to reference. Same with fire, water, building safety, whatever you may have for different teams inside of here. You can color code and make a tool set with the right tools for that team. This is kind of just a simplistic view of how it can be done. They all have the same, like roughly 8 or 10 tools. They're just different properties assigned to each. They know where it came from. So say, for example, if I go to my building safety, and I use my highlight tool on this, it actually comes up with the properties of that have building safety in it. It says what team it came from. Now this can be handled a number of ways. It can be right in the subject of where a certain markup came from. There might be a whole separate column down here that you can create and customize yourself, which has a department name that has all the right properties pre-assigned to it. However you want it to manage that information, how it's being displayed, how you can sort and filter and organize that content, that's entirely up to you. Or whatever makes the most sense for how the data has to flow through the system. So if I grab a very similar tool, say for Public Works, same highlighter, grab that one. That one now has that Public Works tag to it, and it has its own color assigned to it. So you can go through and create these tools pretty quickly, color code them, and just optimize the workflow so you have the right information being displayed on screen that helps you clearly identify who's done what inside of the file. There might be a color coding like this that we have here. Even common notes. So if you ever are certain things that you want to have displayed, if it's a customer copy, whatever it may be, this can be as simplistic as it's just a text string with certain colors and fonts and sizes being used, but it's a common text string that you use over and over and over again. Do it once, define what that information should be, and save it into your tool chest so it's there and available every time moving forward. A more complex version of something like this, like what I got here in my cursor currently, is that this is what's called a dynamic stamp. So we want to go through and place the data in, but prior to being placed on screen, a little dialog box pops up where I choose some options. So is there a denial? It's not approved. Is it something that's approved as noted? However you want to have the current status to be flagged, you choose the right one. Set some options down below as far as by who and when. When you click OK, it's going to have that data then filled out. So I chose the approved as noted, so that's what's checked. And it came back with the date and time over here. And that can be as complicated as you want to make that data. That's up to you. To build out one of these, if you want to make a new set of tools, that's for a different team or a certain team, the steps are pretty straightforward to go through and build the content out. To make a new tool set, you want to go into your tool chest. Go to the bottom of this, you got manage tool sets, and you have add. So when you click on the add, it's going to ask you for a title. That title is the name being displayed on the screen. Like mine says fire stamps or tools or engineering. What do you want to call it? I'll call this new tool set, just for lack of a better name. It's going to ask you for a place to save it. It should default to where the rest is located. That's fine. So now I have a new blank one at the very bottom of my list. The order of these you can organize however it makes the most sense for you. Even what's being displayed here, you probably would trim this down for your particular team. So if I'm part of the community services team, I'm not going to have public works and building safety. I don't need those tools. It's not part of what I want to be able to access. Just turn them off. Just uncheck the ones that I don't need to access. It'll refine your list down to just the tools that's relevant to what you need. So from here, with this new one available, to build these tools out, it's a matter of just simply using the tool and defining what properties that tool should take on. So if I want to make a new highlighter, I can just use the highlight tool and modify it as I need to. So what color should that be? What properties should that take on? Maybe this one's going to be a lovely shade of this light purple color, whatever that color would be. This can be done like I did here for my properties toolbar. It's across the top. Also the properties panel, this little cogwheel, this gear icon. I can expand that out and show that side panel and customize this with properties however I need to as well. Either way, it works fine. One of these that I've modified on other ones is the subject. Like the mine says, public works and community services. I've changed the subject for those tools so it has that name as a prefix to all of it. It helps me sort and organize and get the data just described and listed in a way that makes sense. So call this new highlighter. Whatever color you want to assign, width, opacity, all that. Change those features, those properties as you need to. Now, for getting this tool into your tool set, there's a number of ways to go about doing that. The one I tend to just gravitate towards is I'm a right mouse clicker. When in doubt, I right click. So if I right click on this tool, once I have it selected, add to tool chest, and then which one should that be a member of? And the menu here should match the order of the tools that you have in your current tool chest. Whatever's first, second, third is how they should show up. Mine's at the bottom down here, so it's at the very bottom. You can also get to that same list from the properties panel. So you've got the add to tool chest also here. You get the same menu that will pop up when you select that button. Either way, the way it's going to save the tool initially can impact how you want to use it. This may vary depending on the tool that you're trying to save. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that here. So I drew it with this just short highlight line, not very straight, little squiggly, kind of curve to it. That's the way it's going to initially save the tool. Meaning if I choose to repurpose this on a new file or a new page, I'm going to select it and place it, and it looks the same as the first one. The way it was drawn is the way it's initially saved into my tool set. I can change this into what's called properties mode by simply double clicking the icon. So if I double tap on that, you see the imagery being used here, the thumbnail of that tool has changed. Now it's in properties mode. I can use that however I need to on the PDF, but it still maintains all the other properties. Same color, same name, whatever you may have applied to it, are all still maintained. There's a common example of where it was created, how it was created, may not be how it wants to be reused every time. Now, for the opposite kind of course for that is if you have a common note, you need this verbiage with this formatting, this properties every time, then I wouldn't change that from the drawing mode. I'd leave it set that way. So if I go into my text box, put in, this is my note, whatever you want to have there for that common string of information that you want to share. And same approach. Change the properties with the font, height, color, change this to look the way that you need to have it look. Maybe I'll change this to match that same color. Maybe I'll make it bigger, because why not? Close enough. I want to keep that note just the way it's written. Same verbiage, the way it's spelled, everything is perfect the way it is. Same approach. I'm just going to add this into that same tool set. So that note is right here. Now I can click and place that on any PDF moving forward with that same content. It shows the same way. So one was changed to be into the properties mode. The second one I did, the text one, was maintained as the drawing mode. The way I had typed it, the way I had drawn it, is the way it's stored. I can always come into here, that same icon. I can double click on that too to go back into properties mode to use all the same properties of this. Same color, same font height, whatever you want to have with a different string of text. So leverage that however it needs to make the most sense for you. Now, some of the other common notes that you may be putting in here, you could have some of these that are just default text strings, but even these that come in, they're still modifiable. So you're not stuck with the way it was written as what you have to display. If you want to just tweak one of these things, well, it's not the actual first submittal, this maybe is the second. Modify what's been placed. So you're not locked into that being like a block per se, to where it's just locked down and you got no means to change that. Depending on how you built it, you certainly can change those. Now, also with all this, you've gone through the effort of taking the file in, verify the data you have on it. You have all the right information. You've got the bookmarks and the page labels, all that's been taken care of. You create the session, You invite the team into that session. They all have their feedback on it. How do you get some of that reporting then back out of the PDF? So you can just save this PDF and give that back to your applicant if need be, or if you want to just give them the reporting out of this, maybe you're still going through your process to get iterations and different teams to review it, but the architect's kind of hot to get things rolling forward. They want to get some data from you to keep the changes rolling, so they're more proactive with it. Get the reporting out of here. So you can take the data that's been added to this and pull this out. To get the data from here, you want to go to your summary option. This little box with the arrow on it, that's how we can get the data out. So inside of the summary, you got 4 choices. Depends on what you're trying to create. What does the recipient of this data want to see? What do you want to have them see? The couple of the more commonly used features here, or options here rather, are the CSV, so making your spreadsheet of all the content, or getting a PDF. So what do you want to have pulled from this? So the CSV is your spreadsheet. It would look effectively just like what you have here. You've got complete access to trim that down. So if you want to have 25 columns of content that you have being displayed here in-house, but what you share externally might be only 5 of those columns, you can by all means trim this down into what is the relevant content that you want to share. So you got these other tabs here inside of this markup summary dialog box that you can select on to either filter and sort, or just simply include or exclude the columns in their entirety. So in the filter and sort, if I was only after the content from building safety, or only the stuff from the fire department, or whatever you want to have access to see that output look like, filter off of that. So I can go to my subject in my example here and say, I only care about not everything. I only want to see the content that matches building safety. So all I'm going to get is what matches the subject with the name of building safety. So in my case, it'd be just 2 of them, but you might have 85 different markups from building safety, be pared down to show just those. Even taking that maybe one step further, you might even sort it, maybe by page. So here's the building safety comments, and then you want to then sort that from page 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. You can just sort that by the page. And then just chronologically set those up by page for just building safety. And then you can choose to either include or exclude other columns. So maybe the output, does color factor into that? Maybe, maybe not. Uncheck it. If it doesn't factor into how it's going to be used by the end consumer of this, don't include it. So you pick and choose what's going to be included or not inside of the output. So that's entirely up to you. The other means to go through and kind of have this process then finalized is that you've got the content being brought in, it's been reviewed. If you had to, maybe there was this whole process of, here's my comments, you submit those back to your applicant, they make changes, they resubmit. You can just update the files that are inside of the session. Here's the second submittal being put in. So you would stamp those possibly on that, add those files back into the session. And then the team can then go through the same process to review the new submittal and verify whatever they mentioned was taken care of and addressed. When you're all done, whoever created the session or whoever is at that admin full control permissions within the session scope can go through and they can choose to do what's called finish the session. Basically just to complete this. When you're finishing that session, you choose what happens to whatever PDFs are involved inside of that session. Do you save them into their own folder locally? Do you save them to a network drive share? However you want it to work through all that, you choose how the files are being saved. This option down here for the report This is a report of all of this activity inside of the file. So who's done what, where on that, all that content that's been tracked, you can get that report of that file. It's up to you. If you don't need that, you don't have to have any of that content, just don't have it checked. It doesn't make that report. It's up to you. One benefit of this report is that it tracks everything. So by that, I mean, if I were to, I added my note inside here and I realized later on, yeah, you know what, I don't need that. Remove that out of here. It does flag that as a step that was recorded inside of the session. So even that deletion of the content. So anything that was done, any effort inside of here is recorded. Now the other option that you also have, one of the more commonly used ones, is the PDF summary. So you got your Excel spreadsheet to go through that CSV summary option. You've also got the PDF. Now I do want to reference here too is that any one of these four, it does not matter which one you pick. They all go to the same dialog box. They just change what this export as is defined to be. So right now I chose the PDF, so it shows PDF inside of here. So if you meant to hit maybe the print and you got PDF instead, that's fine. Just go to the same drop-down list and choose print. It's up to you. The print option here is what you would assume, just prints this to paper. So another common one here is the PDF. So you can give yourself this PDF summary of all the markups, and you can give that maybe back to the applicant so they can review that piece. So it's up to you as to what makes the most sense for how you want to convey the messaging between you and whoever has to review this content that you've marked up. So with the tool chest, I've seen one of the questions that came in here about having each division create their own tool set. You don't have to, but it does make it easier to go through and have a defined set of tools for that team to work on that's specific to their needs. So very common is a list of common stamps to go through. So the example here being I've got engineering versus water and community and police and construction. They've all got their own set of tools. A lot of these tools are identical. If you look between my different tool sets, got my Cloud Plus, that's got my Cloud Plus. You know, the arrow, they're all the same tools. They're just defined differently inside here as far as the color and the properties to them. So it can be as simplistic as that, just color coding and labeling each so that comes from the right team. Or it can be as complicated as you want to make it as far as getting into customizing this list down below to have your own columns. Have a department column with the right department team defined inside of it. This lower portion down here, this markups list, is pretty much a blank slate for what you're able to do down here. If you want to customize this, rearrange the order of the content, reposition information inside of here, have at it. All of it is available to be done. One of the first questions that came up about the linking I had done earlier. So all those batch links that were created between the various pages using the page numbers, does that work in other PDF packages? Yes, it's part of the PDF. But it doesn't matter what type of software that you have, it's native to the PDF at that point. Once it's been created, they should be able to take advantage of. So unless the PDF program just doesn't support hyperlinking by any measure, then that may be some limitation to it. I've not seen that yet, but it definitely could be a possibility. Other question that came up here too is, can you create a stamp that is modifiable after it's been created? Yes and no. So I think my answer being yes and no is because of how that you would, what you consider a stamp. So in my case, something like this might be what I call a stamp. It's a common just text box. I'm dropping it in here, placing it. I can change this. I can come into here and modify that to have more new info inside of it. I can modify those post application. But a true stamp So one that would come from your stamp menu. This would be basically behaving much like it'd come from an ink pad and a piece of paper in front of you. Once you put that stamp on there, I can't take that ink off of there unless I got some kind of fancy ink erasing kind of pen to go through and do that. It's there. It's there for the long haul. If I can't go back and say approve, well, I wanted this to have under it or something like that, I can't modify this application. Now, there are some changes I can do. I could potentially change the stamp. So maybe if I grab the wrong one, I didn't want to have the approved stamp, I can go back and grab, say, the back check complete stamp instead. I can do that to it. But I can't come into here and then change the date, because that's added dynamically to the PDF. I can't modify that, post application. So the initial behavior is much like an ink pad would be, a physical, wet stamp being made. But if this was done as a text box from here being dropped in, then I may be able to go through like I did here and modify it after application. So it kind of behaves as a stamp, but it's still seen as a text box markup note, not a true stamp. So just reading through some of the questions. Sorry if it's a little blank right now. So I may not have time to go through and get to all of them. There's a handful inside of here to address, but hopefully that kind of made sense, gave you some idea for how the workflow could work for you. Again, you bring the files in, verify what you have for the data, the labels, that kind of process if it's not been submitted to you with that content already on it. Create the session. You can then invite the team into that environment, get their feedback on the PDF that's been submitted into the session. Now, within the session scope, I also want to point out some limitations to this. This is only for PDF. I can't add like a Word doc into the session to share or some Excel spreadsheet. The studio sessions for PDF exclusive. You're also limited to how many people can be in a session at one time. Now, the number is silly high, so I mention it because it is a cap, it is a limitation to it, but the number typically is so high that it's not a restriction. So the amount you can have in a session concurrently and actively working on a PDF is 500 people at one time. That may cause a little chuckle. Yeah, I get it. The number's obscenely high for that, but there has been some limitations, so that has been met. There have been that many people involved in some sessions where they couldn't get that 500 first person in there to modify. Extremely rare. I'm sure it's going to come up probably once in a never lifetime, but there's a cap to it. Another benefit to the Revu Extreme, I'd mentioned before, with that batch linking, is something, just one of the questions that came up here, is that batch sign and seal. So on the batch menu, there's a tool called sign and seal. This is part of Revu Extreme, but this gives you the opportunity to add in basically 3 things to the file. Now I can't go through and do this on a file in the session, so I have to save this for modifications to it. So I'm going to grab my localized file here just real quick just to show this. So the batch sign and seal, I can load in this PDF or multiple. I can do it across multiple PDFs if need be. But it gives me the chance and the opportunity to do 3 different types of applications of data to this. First one being actually signing at the PDF. So if you actually have your normal a digital signature to be applied, that can be done from here. The nice thing about this environment is that you can just drag where you want to have that show up. So if you have a certain spot where it's supposed to go, it's like, nope, it's always down here in the lower right, that portion of my title block, put it where it's supposed to go. There's also a date stamp you can put in here. So if you want to have that, again, same idea, you can drag this where you want to have that placed. It's just defaulting to the top left corner. Then also stamp it. So you can choose what stamp you want to have and where is that going to go on the PDF. other big benefit to this too is that you can filter this down by page size. So if you know all these larger, 42 by 30 inch prints, those pages, my stamp goes in location X, but on other pages, maybe it's 8.5 by 11, that stamp has to go in location Y, so someplace else. So you can choose based on paper size. All of mine in this current PDF are the same size, so I got just the one sheet size showing up here, but you can pare it down by paper size. So if you do a lot of this effort where you're always verifying and you're stamping and trying to apply this to the various PDFs you're reviewing, this could be a game changer for you. This could be much more efficient means of adding in that effort, that step across multiple sheets. You can just choose what you're trying to do. So if you were just simply trying to sign off on a lot of pages, this might be one of the means of doing that. So hopefully it all made sense. I'll give you some insight as to how the workflow could look and the benefits to it. So questions and answers, I think I got to most of those. There's a couple that I didn't have a chance to read through inside of the questions panel here. Again, I will look at all that content after the recording of all this. I'll give text responses to that one. And even the ones that I did show on screen here, I'll still write out a text response to all those questions as well for anyone that may have missed the session today. They have those answers as well. So for any next steps that you want to have, if you want to dig deeper into this process, something that's just for you and for your team to look at, and you have more questions that are tied to how you want to use the workflow for you, just reach out to us. It's bluebeam@uscad.com. You can call the number there if they ask for someone in the Bluebeam team. We're one of the few resellers in the country that has a dedicated team just to Bluebeam Revu. This is all that I do. It's Bluebeam Revu. I'm not tied into the team from Autodesk or anything else, focused exclusively on this. USCAD actually is the largest Bluebeam Revu reseller in the world. We've done more business than anyone else on the planet. So hope that all made sense. Thank you all for taking your time today. I'm trying to be respectful of being on schedule and on time. I think we're here about a minute early, so that's fine. I am going to hang out for a little bit, so if you do have questions that you didn't have a chance to ask or I didn't get a chance to show that, feel free to ask the question inside of the questions panel. Again, I'm going to hang out here for at least another 5 minutes and just watch the questions as they come in, give you time to type that content in. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.